Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, June the 25th. And welcome to our commentary. Well, I guess you learn something new every day, and there are things that happen that you still have a hard time believing. But maybe I shouldn't be so surprised that a person like the guy who just won the nomination for mayor in New York City. I think his last name is Maldami. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct with all due respect to him. Is now the Democrat candidate or the Democrat nominee for mayor in New York City. You know, the guy's 33 years old. He is, to say the least, quite a leftist. I mean, I just saw a video that says we need to stand up to Donald Trump's fascism and how he is sending ICE to arrest our neighbors. Well, somebody's going to have to explain to this potentially mayor of New York City that ICE is a federal organization and that he lives, or he's going to be the mayor of New York City, which is a city in the United States. And we do have a federal system, and immigration is a matter of the federal government. So somebody's going to have to put this guy, maybe send him to a civics class or something so that he learns a few basic things about the United States. Well, look, I think that this, what just happened in New York City, and I have a post coming out Thursday morning about this. And what happened in New York City is, to a large extent, what's happening to the Democrat Party. And it isn't just in New York City. I mean, maybe you know New York City is the most extreme case, but you go to Chicago and they have a failed mayor. You go to Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, I mean, name it, Philadelphia. Now, some of these cities have moderated a bit because they got to deal with financial reality. But I mean, this thing in New York, this guy, I mean, some of the things that he wants to do is he wants to create government-owned stores so that people can buy food at these stores. He says the food is going to be cheaper, I guess, at these so-called public stores. Well, you know, if my late father was here, as some of you know, I was born in Cuba and I came to the United States in the 1960s with my parents, like many other Cubans did. If my late father was here, or my late mother, either one of them, I think they would say something like, you know, we tried that in Cuba and it really didn't work. And I'm sure they've tried it in other places and it didn't work, like the Soviet Union. These things just don't work. I mean, it's amazing to me that so many people are so gullible that they fall for it. You know, I was looking at some of the stats of who voted for this guy, you know, some of the projections, as they say, or analysis of who voted. Basically, African Americans and Hispanics voted against him. Now, a lot of that could be that they're more, let's say, connected to Cuomo, a more traditional Democrat. And then who voted for this guy? A lot of upscale white people, I guess, who live in the districts in New York where they've got bodyguards and people at the door to protect them from crime. I'm sure they all send their kids to private schools, so they don't have to worry about, you know, the collapsing public schools. But it's just absolutely amazing what we just saw in New York. And, you know, you just look at it and you go, my gosh, you know, and then you hear the interviews with people and they're saying, oh, well, he's going to bring about change. He's not going to change anything. It's just going to be, at best, it's going to be chaos, assuming he can do any of this. Because the idea that the government is going to get into the grocery business, I mean, that's going to be challenged, I'm sure, in the courts, and he's not going to win. So, you know, it's just one of these things where you watch this and you go, how gullible can people be? Well, first of all, I'm not sure he's going to win the election. He's going to be running now against incumbent Mayor Adams, who's running as an independent. I just heard a rumor that Mr. Cuomo, whom he just defeated, is thinking about running as an independent. And there is a Republican in the race too. Nobody knows who he is, but there's a Republican in the race too. So that means that you can have 4 people running for for mayor of New York City, and one of them being the incumbent Mayor Adams. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but it would make a lot more sense, frankly, if Cuomo would endorse Adams and the Republican would endorse Adams, because I think Adams has the best shot at defeating him. I don't believe, again, the Republican is that well known to do it. And maybe Adams could endorse Cuomo and go one-on-one in a general election. Maybe that's another thing that could happen. Or maybe this guy's going to win and he's the next mayor of New York City. What a mess. But this is what, I mean, to me, this victory in New York tells you everything you need to know about the Democrat Party and why they're just falling apart. It's interesting because just yesterday, when they were talking about impeaching President Trump, and by the way, that impeachment effort in the Congress went down 334-79. So only 79 Democrats voted to impeach or to go ahead, go ahead with the proceedings to impeach President Trump. There's 200 Democrats in the House. So that means that only 79 of 200 thought this was a good idea. But anyway, this gentleman, Dean Palmer or Dean Phillips, forgive me if I don't know the name, but he's a congressman from Minnesota who ran for president in 2024 in the primaries. I think it's Dean Phillips. And he just came out with a little statement over at X, the place that used to be called Twitter. And he said, if we want to lose the 26 congressional elections, we need to do two things. Number one, we need to make an effort to impeach President Trump, and we need to elect this guy in New York. Well, the impeachment effort, was tried and failed. And of course, the election in New York, it's not a reality yet, but it's just crazy. The party has gone insane. And I don't know where the moderates are. Where are the moderates who are going to stand up in the Democrat Party? Where's a moderate governor who's going to stand up and say, this stuff is crazy, folks. This stuff is crazy. Well, I don't know. Maybe Shapiro in PA can do it, but does he really have the guts to do it? Because it takes a lot of guts to stand up to these people. I mean, they don't take prisoners when they come after you. So we'll see. But crazy, crazy situation in New York. Almost comical, really, when you think about it, especially when you watch the interviews with people in New York and you're asking yourself, who are these people? What country are they from? I mean, do they really believe this stuff? I guess they do. Well, the other story, of course, is that this whole issue of the evidence of destruction of this facility that was hit the other night. There was a story that came out, I think it was on CNN, saying that there was that it was only set back a few months or whatever. Look, I'm not an expert on intelligence, and just by looking at a site, I'm not going to be able to tell you what the damage is. But it's going to be very difficult to actually find out from 0 to 100 how much the damage was. But my guess is that it was pretty good damage, and that's because the Israelis are saying that. And if you look at that facility, I mean, even if somebody you would have to start digging up what's ever in there, and that would probably take years to dig up everything that is in there, assuming it's still in one piece. So I have to believe that it was a pretty successful operation. But, I guess people just like to play games with all this kind of stuff. But this article that came out talks about a particular piece of intelligence that was made available to somebody in the media. But the report that came out didn't necessarily say that it didn't work, everything was vague. And it's all, again, based on anonymous sources or people familiar with the situation. And we've had so many bad stories like that, frankly. I've gotten to the point that when I see anonymous sources or you don't see a name to the story, you tend to overlook it as just somebody pursuing a political agenda, which is what I think this is. This is somebody within the bureaucracy who's pursuing a political agenda. And the Secretary of Defense said they're going to investigate this leak. I hope they do. I hope they find the person and they process that person the way that they're going to do it. Well, President Trump was over at NATO I think he came back with more and more countries committing themselves to pay more than what they've been paying. That's a good thing, I believe. I think NATO has been on a free ride for quite some time. I mean, the U.S. has basically been paying their way, defending them. And I think the time has come for, some of this to have a little bit of balance. I think they got to pay more. They also have to prepare themselves to defend themselves. That's another thing, too. So much of, look, NATO was created after World War II to protect these countries from a Russian invasion or a Soviet invasion. Many of these countries had been devastated by the war. France, Germany, Italy, they had no ability to protect themselves against let's say, a bunch of Soviet tanks coming into Western Europe. But that's over now. These countries are prosperous, they've got their own economies, and they should be able to spend more money defending themselves. So I hope that that's the result of this. I'm not calling for the U.S. to get out of NATO. I'm not saying that. It's good to have NATO. But at the same time, some of these countries are going to have to realize that they're going to have to be the ones defending themselves and not necessarily the U.S. protecting them, as has been the case for quite some time. So I'm glad to see that some of these countries are willing to pay more. That's a good thing. I've got a post over at the American Thinker today talking about this crazy incident, and we're going to try to have a guest on the video tomorrow, Thursday, to talk about this. But they had this musical festival in France, I guess in several cities. They had a musical festival, and all of a sudden, a bunch of young people went crazy, and they were running around, and they were sticking needles in women's arms, and a bunch of people ended up hospitalized. The whole thing became chaotic and crazy. And this is one of the things that continues to worry me about some of these European capitals. All the crazy people running around, a lot of them are not very nice. And, you're sitting there sticking needles in women's arms and putting them in the hospital. It's pretty crazy behavior on the part of a bunch of young people. So I'm hoping that we have a guest tomorrow, very familiar with France, who's going to be talking about this, because that was really crazy. And if you see the video, I have the video in my American Thinker post. It's just madness. It's like something out of the Twilight Zone or something out of a science fiction movie when these zombies are running around sticking needles in people's arms. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Well, on this day in history, 1942, General Dwight Eisenhower took over control of the European war for the Allies. He became the Supreme Allied Commander of the European War. Of course, General Eisenhower led the invasion of D-Day and the eventual collapse of Germany. And then after the war, he came back to the United States, and in 1952 was elected the 34th president of the United States. So we remember today General Eisenhower, one of the giants of the 20th century, one of my favorite presidents. And he was one of my favorite presidents because I think he understood the limitations of the federal government. That's one of the reasons why I like him so much. Thank you for watching. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.